At the United Nations, a special meeting will commemorate Palestine Day on November 26, on the eve of the anniversary of the petition resolution that stipulated in 1947 the creation of an Arab state in the still occupied territories. The Colombian government reaffirmed on Monday the will to reach a consensus with the National Liberation Army in order to resume the talks suspended since September and called for a meeting on January 25th. Young Cubans gathered on the steps of the University of Havana to pay homage to the 8th anniversary of the departure of Commander Fidel Castro Ruz. Hello, I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. At the United Nations, a special meeting will commemorate Palestine Day this November 26 on the eve of the anniversary of the partition resolution that stipulated in 1947 the creation of an Arab state in the still occupied territories. The meeting will recall all the steps of the organization and will become a space for solidarity after more than a year of Israeli offensive in Gaza. Since 1977, the international date highlights the need to comply with the resolution stipulated the creation of a Jewish state and an Arab state in Palestine. Despite the decades that have passed of the two states contemplated in the resolution, only Israel has been created. And heavy and sea waves flooded tents of displaced Palestinians on west of the city of Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. The torrential rains that fell during the night of Monday flooded the tents and in some places washed away the plastic and cloth shelters. Government teams on the ground reported that of the 135,000 tents, 110,000 are completely worn out and need to be replaced urgently. These heavy rains have deteriorated the humanitarian situation suffered by the thousands of displaced Palestinians, adding misery to the communities already devastated by 13 months of genocidal aggression perpetrated by Israel. And the Syrian government condemns the U.S. support for Israel and Ukraine that undermines security and stability worldwide. The Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned Washington's hostile attitude towards the Russian Federation by supplying long-range ballistic missiles to Ukraine. It also affirmed that the U.S. actions defy the international laws and violate arms control agreements and treaties. Furthermore, he warned that the actions of the United States will lead the region and its surroundings to an unprecedented level of escalation and would also push the world to the risk of nuclear war. Its consequences will be faced by all the peoples of the world. Lebanese authorities reported that 31 people were killed and 64 were wounded after the Israeli regime attacks against different regions of the country on Monday. Lebanon's public health ministry reported that 2 Israeli bombings claimed the lives of 9 people in the center of the municipality of Malakeh, in the district of Tire. In that region, another 8 people were killed in attacks by the occupation army. Heavy shelling and casualties were also reported in the suburbs of Beirut, in the Bekaa region. According to the authorities, on average, 250 civilians were killed every week in November, and 3,768 fatalities have been reported since October 2023. The number of internally displaced people in Africa has tripled in the last 15 years to 35 million, driven by conflict and natural disasters exacerbated by climate change. A study by the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center indicates that 32.5 million of the 35 million people who have fled to other parts of their countries have done so because of conflict. Of these, 80% are currently concentrated in just 5 countries, including the 9.1 million internally displaced by the civil war in Sudan in 2023, already more than 10 million in 2024, where the world's largest internal displacement crisis is occurring. According to the center, figures the next largest group of people displaced by conflict are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. And in Egypt, people are being sought and 28 others were rescued after a tourist boat was wrecked on Monday in the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. The boat was carrying 31 tourists of different nationalities as well as 14 crew members. The Sea Story, a boat capsized, specialized in diving activities, set sail on Sunday from the port of Galip in southeastern Egypt for an expedition and was scheduled to arrive on Friday in Hurghada. According to reports from Egyptian authorities, some survivors were rescued thanks to an air operation and others were evacuated aboard a military ship, adding that the search is actively continuing in collaboration with the Navy and the Armed Forces. Let's take now our first short break, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you're going to be able to find other news in different formats, news updates, and more interesting topics to stay up to date on the world's current events. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Colombian government reaffirmed the will to reach a consensus with the National Liberation Army in order to resume the talks suspended since September and called for a meeting on January 25th. The Colombian government's peace delegation informed that the new meeting will aim to resume the agenda of the negotiating table and evaluate if it is possible to reactivate the bilateral ceasefire suspended due to growing tensions. Spokesman for the government of Gustavo Petro and the National Liberation Army held an extraordinary meeting from the 19th to the 25th in Caracas, one of the venues of the itinerant dialogue, along with Mexico City and Havana. In other news, miners are blocking streets in southern Peru to demand the government of Dina Boluarte to extend the deadline for completing mining formalization. The miners demand an extension of the period for the integral mining formalization registry, which ends on December 31st, 2024. They argue that the formalization process is very difficult to achieve as they depend on their third parties to obtain a contract to exploit mining land. According to statistics, 500,000 Peruvians would lose their work permit, thus they would not be able to work legally after the closing of the registry. In this regard, the mobilized people warn that they will remain on the streets until their demands are heard. And according to the United Nations Population Fund, in the last years, Argentina has recorded over 2,400 femicides, resulting in at least 2,047 children losing their mothers. Surveys indicate that approximately 45% of Argentine women experience gender-based violence at some point in their lives. The organization emphasizes that one of the most devastating effects of these femicides is the impact on children left without mothers, which severely affects their well-being and development. The head of the United Nations Population Fund in Argentina, Mariana Isasi, stressed the need for a collective commitment to ensure the protection of women and girls. And also in Argentina, more than 17 million people are exposed to arsenic-containing water, according to recent research to be published in the journal Water and Health. The scientist who led the work, Alejandro Oliva, equates it to an epidemic. In fact, studies are being conducted that prove the connection between this contaminant and diseases such as cancer and Alzheimer's. Arsenic is a natural occurring contaminant that comes from the erosion of rocks in aquifers. However, it is also reported to a lesser extent as a result of human activities linked to industrial processes such as mining, metal smelting, and the use of pesticides. Uruguay's president-elect Yamandu Orsi visited his mentor, former President José Mujica, a day after his victory on the ballot, which marks the return of the left to power after 5 years of center-right government. On his first day as president-elect, Orsi said that going to see Mujica was an obligation. The meeting was held at Mujica's house on the outskirts of Montevideo. Orsi spent around 2 hours talking with Mujica about various issues and also with his wife, Lucia Topolansky. In this context, Orsi affirmed that the experiences of these two figures have been of great significance for his political work.
And with respect to the region, I am deeply integrationist. In a world that is closing, even more you have to have a good link with the region because today in 1 month it can change you. The world is sitting on a powder keg.
Let's now take our second short break, but not before inviting you to go to our YouTube page, our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, where you'll find our special interviews, broadcastings, and much more. We'll be right back. Welcome back. With the presence of Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and other top leaders of the Caribbean country, young university students gather on the steps of the University of Havana to pay homage to the 8th anniversary of the death of Commander Fidel Castro Ruz. The political cultural event evoked the memory of the man who led the Cuban Revolution, following the ideals of great Cuban heroes such as José Martí, Antonio Maceo, and Carlos Manuel de Céspedes. Cuban President Díaz-Canel said that Fidel lives among the people, adding that he is in every idea and every work of the revolution. After his physical disappearance, Cubans remember him as a symbol of greatness for their history. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump threatens to introduce on his first day in office sweeping tariffs on all products from Mexico, Canada, and China, countries he accuses of smuggling drugs into the United States. According to the Republican, the measure will be enforced until drugs, particularly fentanyl, and illegal immigrants stop entering the U.S., adding that Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this problem. Trump also blamed China for the massive amounts of drugs entering the country and stated that he will impose an additional 10% tariff on top of any other tariffs on all products from the Asian giant entering the U.S. And in Haiti, according to reports, 94% of women are exposed to some form of gender-based violence, and of all the complaints received, about 80% refer to sexual violence. The director of the United Nations Population Fund for Latin America and the Caribbean, Susana Sotoli, affirms that criminal gangs subject girls and women to horrific sexual abuse, and survivors have limited access to protection and care services. In this context, reports indicate that Haiti has experienced a 1,000% increase in sexual violence against children by the year 2024. Although humanitarian organizations are working with local authorities to provide essential services for victims, aid remains insufficient and inaccessible. Meanwhile, hundreds of women in Panama demanded justice this Monday in an unprecedented demonstration bringing together feminist organizations in the framework of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Activists demanded the state policies to protect women's lives in the face of the increase of gender violence. Demonstrators emphasized that violence transcends physical aggression, since inequalities persist in the political, economic, and domestic spheres. Other demands included the lack of recognition of women's disproportionate burden of household chores, as well as the cultural and structural barriers that hinder their access to better paid leadership positions. In Santiago de Chile, thousands of women gathered on Monday at Alameda Avenue to celebrate the International Day Against Violence Against Women, marching peacefully and without incidents. The Chilean Network Against Violence Against Women, one of the entities that have made the call through a statement, expressed that there are serious allegations against public and powerful individuals accused of violence and sexual abuse. After the alleged rape perpetrated by the former Undersecretary of the Interior, Manuel Monsalve, the progressive government of President Gabriel Boric was criticized for not acting immediately and dismissing the Undersecretary. Let's remember that the president, since he took office in 2022, defined himself as a feminist government.
This is to show solidarity with all the women abused every day in this country, in this continent. Although there have been some advances, we have to show our anger. There is still a long way to go. We must continue to demand change.
And around 199 Cuban doctors arrived in Mexico to work in remote communities as part of the existing agreement between the two countries. Last July, during the administration of López Obrador, it was announced that nearly 2,700 new doctors would arrive in the country to provide services in 282 basic hospitals and integrated communities located in rural or highly marginalized areas. As explained at the time by the former director of the Mexican Social Security Institute, Zoe Robledo, Cuban doctors will go to cover high-demand specialties. After her election to office, President Claudia Sheinbaum expressed her intention to continue with the agreement with Cuba in health matters. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other news on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social medias on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.